This is Dan Schneider. On this Dan Schneider video interview, I am speaking with Marina Bruno. She is a young filmmaker, and I will be talking about her career thus far and also her first feature-length film. And we'll begin in a moment. I'm speaking with Marina Bruno, and she's a young filmmaker that I found on YouTube. As I've done in the past, I like to feature interesting websites and or YouTube channels, and I came upon her channel called Wondering Pictures, and it is a site that has probably about 8, 9, 10 short films that are under, I guess, about 8, anywhere between 5 and 25, 30 minutes. And she's just going to be, she released a few months ago her first feature film. But I found very interesting about her work was that it harkened back in a lot of ways to an earlier Hollywood aesthetic. So Marina, welcome, and if you could tell me a little bit about yourself for a few minutes, who you are, where you come from, and your interest in film.
Hello, thank you so much for having me. Yeah, so my name's Marina Bruno. I'm an independent filmmaker currently living in Ottawa, Canada. And I've been filmmaking my whole life, pretty much ever since I was 3 years old. I started making videos using my dinosaur toys as actors. And this is because my father is a filmmaker from Argentina. So he sort of molded me into the artist that I am today. He taught me everything I know about film. So I've basically been learning the art ever since I was a baby. My whole life, I had film school basically. And yeah, so I do short films. Everything is just from my home. I use all local actors and the cast and crew and everything from my hometown. And yeah, I like to think of my basement as my studio. So there I have all my equipment and stuff. And yeah, and I distribute everything online.
Well, you mentioned that your father was a filmmaker. Was he born in Argentina? How many films has he done? Is he someone who did short films, industrial films, documentaries, or did he do feature films?
Yeah, so my dad he was born in Argentina and he grew up there. He moved to Canada when he was about 25 years old, I believe. Yeah, he's also been a filmmaker his entire life. Um, but living in Argentina, it's a country that's in poverty. So he could never have the opportunities that I had to create films because he could never have access to a camera or any equipment. So he did a few short films growing up. Every time that he was able to borrow a camera from his uncle who had some equipment and stuff like that. Every little opportunity he had, he was able to create something. And what he made with the limited materials that he was able to obtain is amazing work. So he was very, very talented. So yeah, he did a lot of short films growing up. And then when he moved to Canada, he did another short film. I'm not sure if he did it in Canada or Costa Rica, but this one's called My Field of Flowers. And he received a award for Best Filmmaker in Ottawa. So this was a few years back. Yeah, I don't know too much about his sort of biography about the films and the works that he's done before I was born. That's something that he would have to speak about because I don't know really the specifics. But yeah, he did work on the Rogers Channel too as well, and he produced a lot of television shows. And then in 2005, he wrote, direct, produced, starred in, and edited his first feature film. And I acted in it as well. And his feature film was called In April. Um, he did that, and he is just finishing it now, and he's getting it ready for distribution. And it was just accepted into the Milledgeville Film Festival, which is happening now in April in Georgia in the States. So we're going to be going to that. And yeah, so that's the most I can say about my dad's past works. But I think you'd have to sort of have him on the show as well to more talk in detail about the stuff that he's done. But yeah, he's a very, very talented filmmaker.
How about the rest of your family? Your mother, do you have any siblings? Are they actors? Are they writers? Are they involved in the arts?
Yeah, yeah, I have an older sister as well. Her name is Carla, and she is an actress and an entrepreneur. She has her own cake company, and she has her own television show as well, where she teaches about cooking and baking and showing recipes and stuff like that. So she's also involved in the arts. She likes to be like in front of the camera, and she's very good at that. And she also has a YouTube channel where, yeah, my sister, she also loves to travel the world. So she has a separate YouTube channel where she sort of vlogs all of her adventures. And she is currently living in Dubai. So she posts a lot of cool stuff like that too. And my mother, she's sort of the manager behind all of our works, because everyone in my family, we're sort of like our own boss. So my mom is sort of always helps with like behind the scenes, getting everything ready, getting like helping things happen, sort of.
Um,
But yeah.
Wondering Pictures is the channel of your YouTube that I came across, your YouTube channel, and it's interesting because you mentioned earlier about doing all the work in your basement in terms of editing. I think there's actually like a behind the scenes video that I saw on your channel that shows a little bit of a couple of the computers and stuff you use. Just for any other young filmmakers who might listen to this or stumble across your channel
Yeah.
and be impressed. What because I don't see many obvious special effects in your films. Well, I mean, there's blood on, that you use fake blood and whatnot, but not a lot of what you call CGI. Do you use one or two cameras? Because usually it looks like you have maybe three or four people who are helping you, other than the people who act in your short films. Talk about how you would go about, let's say, making one of your 8 or 10 minute short films. Do you write out a script? Is it there a lot of is it just made a lot of it made up on the spot, or do you write out everything? And when you film it, do you do a lot of editing and change from the original conception of the idea that you originally had?
Mm. Okay, so you said that I don't do a lot of CGI. Have you seen my short film Civil War?
Oh yeah, where your father is shooting the bird,
Right
or
now with the burn, there's explosions. So
yeah,
that there, all the explosions and the gunshots, that's all in post production.
okay.
Yeah, so those I do some post production. But yeah, so I only use one camera. I don't um I don't usually like set up three different cameras and then shoot the scene and then sort of edit it together. I just do like each take at a time with the one camera. And for my behind the scenes crew, I always have someone on sound. So I have someone with the boom mic and the recorder, and I have them in charge of that. And I will usually have a couple people as sort of production assistants, helping out with getting the props and the makeup and holding the script and the storyboard and sort of helping me with that. Yeah, I don't usually have a huge crew on set. It's usually just like a couple people. And it's always like people helping me with the behind the scenes are always like my friends and everyone who's like willing to help out, who they're also interested in film. And yeah, oh yeah, and the process for doing a short film. So yeah, I'll write the script, but before writing the script, I'll figure out the context of where the short film is going to take place, and I usually find a location that I'm able to film in, and I think about all the practical things that I will need to shoot it, and I consider sort of the resources I have, so that I know that I'm able to film it. And then after I sort of figure out all that, then I will write the script based on what I have. And then, so yeah, I write the script. Usually I will, well, usually all the time I give it to my dad. He'll look through it. He'll give me pointers. He'll revise it, sort of help me really clean up like the story arc and all that stuff. And then after that, when I have the script, then I'll go to the location. I'll take pictures so I know sort of where, like, the things that, like, where they are, sort of. And then I'll do the storyboard. And the storyboard takes me a really long time. That usually takes me like 1 to 2 weeks, I guess, depending on how long the short film is. But yeah, I'll do the storyboard, and then after that, I'll get the props, audition the actors, and then it usually takes us about a day to film for the short films.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Let me just ask you then, because I want to cover a lot of ground and also get inside your creative process. Because one of the things I like to do in these interviews is not
Mm.
just talk, not just sort of to pimp a product, but to get into what drives a person. Because I usually do shows focused on ideas, philosophy, or art or whatnot.
Right. Yeah.
Where does your initial idea come from? For example, let's talk about your feature film. I think it's something like 65 minutes, so it's a short
Yeah.
feature film, but
Yeah.
and it's I guess about some scam artists or whatnot. Where does an idea like that come from? Is that a mishmash of films that you've seen and you try to repiece something together? Was it something that someone might have told you at a party, or something your father might have read somewhere and shown to you? Where does an idea generate from?
It's so hard to answer that question when people ask me where I get my ideas, like the initial like epiphany. I guess I don't. Hmm. It's usually different depending on the short films. Like sometimes the initial idea will just come from an image that I see or a picture that I look at, or sometimes I'm literally just like sitting in my room listening to music, and then I just think of a random scene and I'm like, oh, that would be cool. And then I write down sort of the basics and then I build from there. Um, yeah, honestly, it's like, it's as if like some spirit just came and put an image in my head, and then I'm like, oh, that's cool. And then I'll write down the idea. But for Cotton String specifically, the way I wrote that script is that I started off with picturing the characters. So I'm like, okay, what characters do I want to talk about in the story? Like who can be like the main, like the leads? So I just pictured, I don't know, I just pictured two guys wearing suits. One guy wearing a brown suit and one guy wearing a blue suit, and I was like, "Oh, that's kind of like a cool combination of people." And then I just pictured a crazy hippie guy with long, crazy curly hair and Beatles sunglasses and just super crazy. And then I picture, I love classic cars, so I'm like, okay, maybe I can like incorporate a classic car into this story, or like I don't know, whatever happens. So I don't know. I just kind of like piece random images together. I'm like, okay, so who owns the classic car? I'm like, okay, I'll have the hippie own it. I'm like, okay, so what are these two guys in the suits gonna do with this hippie? Like, why are they in the story together? Like, what's gonna happen? So I'm like, okay, two guys in suits. I'm like, well, I picture businessmen or bankers. So I was like, okay, well, I don't think I'll be able to have access to film in a bank and everything. So I'm like, what's a more simple form of this? So I'm like, okay, two regular guys who want to invest. So that's kind of like bankers or venture capitalists or something like that, but in a more like simple level, I guess. So I'm like, okay, so two guys that want to invest, and then I always had an idea. I always thought that it would be cool to have an electric motor inside of a classic car. Sorry, do you know the concept of the movie? Have you seen the film?
No, no. I've only read about it. I've seen all your short films though that you have on
Okay,
there.
okay. So yeah, the feature film is about these two guys who want to invest in the hippies idea, which is an electric motor inside of a classic car. So yeah, so I always thought it would be a cool thing to have a classic car and have an electric motor inside of it because that'd be good for the environment, and I love old cars. So okay, maybe I can do, you know, that could be the hippies idea, and he wants investors. So I'm like, okay, so these two guys want to invest, and then it kind of just like went from there. And I'm like, hey, so like something has to go wrong now. So then I added more characters, and I just pictured these two brothers who are always fighting, and they like smoking weed, and they're just crazy, and they're violent, and yeah, I kind of just like piece stuff together, and it just goes from there. But there's no like one big idea that I had, or there's not one inspiration that made me want to make this movie. It's more just like getting different puzzle pieces and then just kind of piecing it together.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was for sure like really really um, challenging to write the feature film. It's probably one of the hardest things I've ever done because you really have to make things make sense, but you also want to sort of keep it entertaining and fun. But yeah, so that's sort of my process, I guess.
About a year ago, I interviewed a fellow named Michael Jason Allen, and he lives down in Arizona, and he does independent films too. And he did a pretty good film that he shot for only like 5,000, and he's done one other film so far, and I think he's working on his maybe fourth film. And
Oh,
he has what would be called a stock company. He in
mm-hmm.
most of his films, the same actors reappear. Is that something that you have in your short films, and do some of those actors appear in the longer film? And is that something that, as an independent filmmaker, I would think that would be a more cost efficient thing because obviously you're not going to be able to pay people a lot of money. If anything, a lot of these people would probably be doing it for love and of the art form.
Yes. Yeah, everything for this film was volunteer. No one was able to get paid except for in food.
Yeah.
But yeah, I use I use reoccurring actors mostly because I've worked with them in the past, and I know that I work well with them, and I know that they can give me what I want in a character, and I know that they're good at understanding um, the style that I want to sort of portray through the character from the script. So yeah, I work with the same actors because I know that I work well with them. So yeah, and especially for my feature film, since this was like a really big endeavor, I thought I didn't really want to take too many risks by working with a whole new cast that I've never worked with before, and I don't know that they might be good, they might be bad, they might not work well with me, there might not be good chemistry on set. So that's also why I was like, okay, for the feature film, I'll use a lot of the actors that I already know because I know that they'll show up on set. I know that they're dedicated to creating the character, and I know that they're passionate about what they do.
You live
So
in
yeah, a lot of sorry, go ahead.
you live in Canada. I wanted to ask
Yeah.
you, is it easier to distribute independent films in Canada than in the US? Because in the US, everything nowadays, I mean, film, at least cinema that you see in a theater, has become so juvenile compared to even television. Whereas it used to be you could get, and I would assume, and I'll assume that you have a good history of filmmaking because of some of your influences, and I'll talk to you about that in a moment. But it seems to me that you have a good knowledge of film history that
Mm,
you draw influences from. Uh,
yeah.
do you think that that it's easier to get indie distribution in Canada? Because I know your feature film is like for $4.99 on YouTube, whereas you have your small films or short films up for free. Have you played in theaters? Have you gotten distributed outside of Ottawa? And how has that gone?
In terms of distribution, I've been doing everything myself. So I've been doing all self distribution. I've just been putting it up online. I have it on my YouTube channel and everything. Um, So I don't have any other like external distribution showing it in theaters and stuff like that. I have played my films in film festivals
Uh-huh.
in the States and everything. So I don't know if that's a form of distribution, but yeah. I don't know. Yeah, maybe there is a difference in distributing stuff in Canada versus the States, because I feel like there's a lot more competition in the States, because you guys have Los Angeles and New York, and there's a lot more ambition in the U.S. Whereas in Canada, it's a small group of artists, so there's not too much stuff going on. So every time there is something going on, people really get hyped up about it, and there's like a lot of support,
Yeah.
Especially from the city that I'm from. I'm from Ottawa, and it's such a government-driven city. There's barely any artists here. It's a really gray, boring city. Nothing really happens. So the small, yeah, it's very boring. But I don't know. I guess that's the way it is. But the small group of artists that there is here, we're all like super passionate and super supportive of each other. So there is a small group here, but that just means that there's less competition, I guess. But yeah.
In the second part of the interview, I want to talk about some of your short films that I watch, and sort of talk about some of the things in there and what you might have done and what you might have been influenced by. But I want to talk in general about your knowledge of film history and influences, because one of the things, when I often get people wanting to send me DVD screeners or review films, and most of the times these are young filmmakers or independent filmmakers that have, schlock horror films, the Beast that ate 17 tits or something. And it's like,
Yeah.
I don't want to waste my time with that. So it's very rare that I come across something that shows some potential or smarts. I know that in one of your, I guess, explanatory videos, you talked about Quentin Tarantino being an influence, and certainly there are some quirky characters in your stuff. But one of the things about Tarantino is his films don't have like a lot of the psychological depth, and I'm wondering, since a lot of the stuff that you have in your films, and I'll talk about this a little bit later, have these tropes that go back to sort of the Frank Capra 1930s, 1940s types of films. Talk to me a little bit about what films you grew up watching with your father, perhaps, what the influence of classic Hollywood had on you, because certainly your musical scores and the fonts that you use in your short films certainly are throwbacks to an earlier era.
Mm-hmm. Um, yeah, the biggest influence for me is, of course, Tarantino. I think he's like a film god. I've seen all of his films, and I love his style. The way he tells a story is like so blunt and sarcastic and crazy. I just love it. So he's a big influence for me. I found a lot of inspiration in the way that he tells stories. But yeah, growing up, my dad I actually didn't. I haven't watched too many films from that era, from like the 30s and the 20s. I just love that retro style. I just think it's really has a lot of character. Um, but growing up, yeah, my father showed me a lot of Spielberg, um, Stanley Kubrick, of course Tarantino. Um, yeah, those directors. I haven't seen too much of the 20s. Well, I have seen Casablanca, but that's pretty much it from that era.
Well, it's interesting that you say that, because, as I said, some of your shorter films are so suffused with that. Also, the musical songs. How do you score a film then? Because you have some films where some wacky things happen, but you sort of underplay that by having these sort of 1940s sounding big band jazz kind of musical things. I mean,
Yeah.
like, a housewife walking through a park, you might think of, but yet there might be something just off the wall going on.
Yeah, well, also the reason why I use music from that era is because all that music is public domain.
Ah, okay.
Because yeah, since it's from the 20s, I think it's like what 80 years after the artists pass away, you can use their music.
Uh-huh.
It's for the public, but and also I just love it because the music from that time is so like upbeat and happy and so full of energy, and I like putting that over scenes where things are going wrong because it's kind of like making fun of it, and it's kind of sarcastic in a way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One other thing I wanted to mention, and we'll end this first half. In the second half, we'll talk more about some of the individual short films of yours I've seen. Another influence, and I don't know if this is a direct influence or are you influenced by something that was influenced by something that was influenced by something, but I don't know. Have you ever seen the original Twilight Zone television shows? Because your films, they have those little twist endings there. Something happens, and then there's either a sort of comic or uh, a twist ending of some sort that subverts it. For example, there's one of your films has a guy taking a driving test, and we don't know this until the last few shots.
Yeah.
And then probably my favorite of your films is the one where the girl you are riding a bicycle, and and it seems like it's a horror film or a slasher film with a guy running after you, and you think that he's the bad guy, but it turns out that the biker
Right.
is the scam artist who just picked his pocket.
Yeah, yeah.
So I mean, were you influenced by something like the Twilight Zone old show, or is that just something that's part of your own aesthetic?
Yeah, no, I wasn't influenced. My dad always tells me that I have to watch the Twilight Zone series. He always says like you have to watch it. They're amazing. They're amazing. But no, I haven't even seen one episode of that.
Huh.
Um, for the twist endings, uh, that that's my own sort of that's my own idea. Like I just came up with it myself because I think for a short film, the best way to pay off a 5 minute story is by giving a twist ending and sort of like making the audience laugh and be like, haha, gotcha, you know?
Hmm.
It's kind of like when you tell a joke. When people tell jokes, they always tell the whole story of the joke and people don't know what's going on until the last line, until the punchline, and then people go, oh, that's funny, right?
Yeah.
And jokes are short, right? So I think for a short film to really, I just think it's the best way to sort of give it a nice payoff, you know?
Now, your feature film, is that a comedy or a drama?
Both drama comedy.
Okay, so
Comedy.
if you project out 5 or 10 years, then I mean, I would assume that you hope that you can maybe get some backing or win, maybe get into a film festival and maybe win it and get some backers for a larger project. Do you excuse me? Do you hope to focus more on comedies or dramas? Do you have ideas for films? Like if let's say you had the resources behind you, and they said, Marina, you can make your dream project. Would this be a sci-fi film? Would this be a film about a married couple breaking up? Would this be a film about some boobs like Laurel and Hardy in some comedy film? What would be your ideal project?
Definitely would be a drama comedy. Um, I don't know if I would ever do just like a straight up drama because I like personally I'm sort of a really comedic person and I find humor in everything. So naturally, even if I wrote a drama, naturally it would probably become a comedy or a drama comedy. So yeah, I don't think I would do like a crazy sci-fi or like a Star Trek type thing. Yeah, it would probably be a dramedy. I don't have a specific story that I would want to do for my next feature film, but it might be similar to Cotton String, but just like to the next level, you know, with just like more production value, more expensive props, I guess you could say. But yeah, I would stick with drama comedy.
Yeah. I want to end this first segment just saying that I'm looking at your screen image, and you sort of posed in what looks like a classic 1960s European actress kind of model there, looking
Oh
off into the
yeah.
gaze. I would recommend, just as someone who's watched a lot of films, first off, I would recommend just for your own growth, if I don't know if you have the Criterion Collection DVDs available there, or if you go to like Hulu, I think you if you join Hulu for $8 a month, you can watch most of the Criterion stuff. There are a number of filmmakers that I think I see things, little bits of yours that could I think be greatly expanded. The first one comes to mind is Federico Fellini, and you can ask your father about
Right,
some of
my
the
dad always tells me about him.
yeah.
I don't think I've seen a film with him yet.
Yeah, Fellini is a filmmaker that I think you would do well to watch his best and his films from the 50s to the mid 60s. Another filmmaker that I think every young filmmaker should watch is Akira Kurosawa from Japan. There are lots of great Japanese filmmakers from probably the 1950s and 60s. Japan made the best films in the world, bar
Yeah,
none. And Kurosawa is probably the most diverse director. If you like Star Wars, um, a, he did a film called The Hidden Fortress, which uh, Lucas admits he stole a lot of the ideas from. And The Hidden
but
Fortress is a much better, more well acted and funnier film. But yet it had a great star, Toshiro Mifune. Another filmmaker that I think that you would do well to watch is Michelangelo Antonioni, because he doesn't have any comedy, but his films have a deep existential angst. And you're only, I think, 20 years old or 21.
yeah,
As you get older, you hopefully you'll want to do things with a bit more depth. And I would watch the one film of yours that I would say that you should watch of Antonioni's is Blow Up. It's the first English language film that Antonioni did in 1965, and it's about a photographer that seems to see a murder, but as he blows up the image of what seems to be a dead body, it gets more diffuse and more diffuse. He goes to find the body, he finds it, tries to bring someone back to confirm it, and then it's not there. And so these are the kinds
oh,
of things.
interesting.
These are the kinds of things that I see little moments where you at 20 years old, sort of embryonic, that I could see you as you grow having these kind of ideas. So those would be my recommendations to you. Um,
Okay.
but let's end this first segment. In the second segment, I want to go through maybe 4 or 5 of your short films, talk about what's in there, and talk about how you came up with the ideas and the general aesthetic that you have. And we'll do that in a moment. I'm talking with Marina Bruno about her YouTube channel called Wondering Pictures. She has done a number of short films that she has online that you can look for free. She's also done an hour plus long feature film that you can also get there. It's called Cotton String. But initially I watched a couple of months ago. I guess you have maybe about a dozen almost short films up there. I wanted to talk about some of them. I'd mentioned some of them earlier. I think I'll start off with the one fail. I'll just go down the list here that you have them in. This is a film that again has one of these little twist endings. It starts off with a car on a sort of deserted country road. A guy is driving like a maniac, and then at the end of I guess it's what, 3 minutes, we sort of pulled back and we see that he's actually been taking a driving test and he fails. Um, and it's you have cars play a role in a couple of your films, 2 or 3 of your films. Um,
Huh.
this this is one of those films that I think would probably have 100 years ago been a funny little short in the silent film era. And in fact, you basically could have done this film almost as a silent film. There's almost no need for talking there. You could have gotten away with it. How much actual dialogue was in there, and was it just the idea of doing something funny like that, or was this one of the things that you had an idea and it sort of mutated as you filmed it?
So for dialogue, there's like two lines of dialogue at the very end.
Yeah.
Just when the instructor says, "I'm sorry, but you failed," and then the guy's like, "Oh, come on," and then that's it. But no, actually, this short film wasn't my idea. It was actually my sister who came up with the idea, and she told me about it. And then I went on to write the script, and then I filmed it. I made this one for a film competition type festival called the Digi 60, and it's in Ottawa, Canada. And what this festival is that they give you, so like I think it's like 25 filmmakers sign up, and then they give you sort of a prompt, which is just one word. So
Ah,
for them, their word was renewal. Yeah, it was renewal. So they said that's all they give you. They give you one word, and then you have 2 weeks to write, shoot, and edit a short film that you need to incorporate renewal in it however way you want to. So they gave us the prompt, and I spent the first week just like sitting, like trying to think of an idea. I couldn't think of anything. I was like, oh my god, what can I do for renewal? Ugh. So then I was like asking my friends or whatever, and I asked my sister, I'm like, what should I do for renewal? I have a week left to film this. What should I do? Like, can you help me? And then she's like, oh, why don't you do it? Why don't you do a guy who's like renewing his driver's license? But you
mm,
don't say that until the end. So like throughout the whole film, it's like Fast and the Furious. Like he's driving through curves. He's like driving past stop signs. There's like explosions and stuff like that. And then at the very end, you find out that he's just renewing his license. So like, oh, that's perfect. So then I wrote it. I did the storyboard and then filmed it and edited it in a week. And then I actually won an award for the festival.
mm.
So yeah, it was cool.
Yeah, so that brings to mind, did you go to film school then?
No, I did not.
Okay, because I know oftentimes with writers, I'm a writer, and writers often get those kinds of assignments. I never went to do any writing at any kind of school or teaching or whatnot, but a lot of times they seem to be a silly waste of time. But it's interesting that you did finally come up with an idea. I had mentioned earlier the Waste of a Fall one, and I think that was the first one I saw. And in this one, you play a girl who's riding her bike through some wooded area, and she falls, and she's wailing on the ground a little bit, and then she sees a guy there, and then she starts wailing a little bit harder. But you
Yeah.
don't necessarily notice that until the second time you watch the film. The
Right.
guy comes to help her or whatnot. She bikes off, and then we get sort of the idea that he's stalking. We get a few point of view shots. We get the music that gives you or gives the viewer the sense that this is, going to be a slasher, horror, stalker film or whatnot. And then at
Yeah.
the end, it turns out that she's the scam artist. Now, that's another good idea. And in both of the first two films I've mentioned, you have deliberately kept away what Alfred Hitchcock called the MacGuffin, or the MacGuffin being the idea that there's something that a character is after, but
Mm.
it isn't necessarily a thing. For example, if you ever saw uh, a thing like well, probably the best MacGuffin that Hitchcock used is in Psycho, where Janet Leigh is in the shower, and you think that the movie is going to be about her ripping off uh, $100,000 or whatever she does from her company and flying, uh, taking flight. But then it turns out Anthony Perkins kills her about 40 minutes into the film, and the film becomes about him. And so
Right.
here you have the MacGuffin of that the girl is being stalked.
Yeah.
She's the poor damsel in distress from this potential psycho, but he's really the injured party.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about that film. How did that come about? Your idea for that?
Uh, Again, so for this one, it was the fall time in Canada, and the leaves were beautiful. So I was like, okay, I should probably film something outside to capture the beautiful nature and the leaves changing color. So I was like, okay, I'll film something in a forest. So then I pictured, okay, what the hell happens in a forest? I'm like, okay, a girl biking. And then I just pictured like, okay, let's do like a scary chase scene, like a creepy guy. I just like visualize things, you know. I'm just like, okay, what's happening? Whatever. A creepy guy is coming. I'm like, okay, what happens if he starts chasing her? And then I just figured like, okay, what would be a good way to like end this? Like, why is he chasing her? Whatever. And then so yeah, I always try to work on twists. So then I thought, um, okay, well, I'll have it so that the audience thinks he's chasing her for one reason, but it'll be for another. And then I just pictured, okay, he's chasing her because he wants her wallet, not because he wants to kill her. Yeah, I don't know. I just pictured it. I kind of switched the roles, sort of
Mm-hmm.
the protagonist and the antagonist sort of switch roles at the end of the movie, right?
Yeah.
So
Uh,
yeah, I guess that's yeah.
well, the reason I pointed out, and this is one of the reasons I wanted to interview you, because at a young age, I've seen there are a lot of people who have directed big Hollywood budget films, and they're so formulaic, and that you here at least have the ability to want to switch things up and not fall into the cliched trap is a good thing, and
Yeah.
it's something to be encouraged. We mentioned the film Civil War, and this has your father in it, and this speaking of the Twilight Zone, this has a very Twilight Zone-ish kind of feel to it. A man's out in a cabin somewhere in the woods. He's looks like he's been alone for many years, possibly doesn't have a wife or kids. He's maybe one of these kind of hermits. And then
Yeah.
all of a sudden we start hearing some shots, and I forget if he gets maybe nicked or something. And it all starts when he's shooting at the bird. So there's the sense that nature has turned against him. So talk a little bit about that film. That one runs what, just about 9 minutes,
Yeah.
and so that's sort of a mid-length one of your short films. Talk a little bit about that film and about its ending too. And was this something that you and your father collaborated on in terms of the idea, or was he just the actor in it?
Uh, yeah, my dad did help me a little bit with the story, with how I could end it, how I could make it so that um, at the end of the film, everything was just in his head, right?
Yeah,
Because he stops and he's like, "Hey, I'm not going to shoot the bird." And also, my dad helped me with editing that one a lot for the special effects and all that.
yeah,
Um, this one, a lot of people think that this film is about like man versus nature,
uh-huh,
and but it's actually not. This one is more, for me, it's more of a film that talks about internal struggles and sort of like what people go through when you're just when you question things too much. Because I don't know if you notice at the beginning and the end, the man he's smoking and he's listening to something on the radio,
yeah,
and it's like a poem about talking about like what's the reason of life. Like although science tells us everything, we still don't know why. Like life is just you're born, you live a while, and then you die, and that's it. But we don't know why. So this one more represents like the the urge to find out the meaning of life, basically. But this film says that if we try to find out too aggressively, sometimes you'll just sort of implode in on yourself, and it doesn't really solve any problems. You know when you think too much, when you overthink things, you
hmm,
just kind of go nuts, basically. So
yeah,
that's sort of that's kind of like the subtext of the film. Like the bird represents him questioning. Like he kills the bird, and then it just the whole world just attacks himself. So
yeah.
that also represents like his mind and everything. This one's more like poetic, I guess you could say.
Yeah, well, and it's one of the films too that when I saw it, I'm like, well, this girl has good ideas. She's got a mind, and I say that because like I said, I get so many filmmakers who are indie or young filmmakers that just want to do splatter and gore type films, or they just want to do Fast and Furious, 27 kind of films.
Right.
And here you're showing in these little bits and pieces of of a mind that goes beyond that, and that's something that augurs or foreshadows something that potentially you could be, hopefully a great filmmaker down the line, and that's one of the reasons I wanted to interview you. Um,
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
um, I wanted to talk about two other of your short films. I don't want to talk about all of them. And you did have one other film that went about 30 minutes, Chocolate Milkshake. But
But
I wanted to talk about two other films that I think really demonstrate what a good mind and potential that you have. The other one, I mentioned that you had done another film that involved a car. And this again gets back to the Twilight Zone. Let me see. It's the one called Short Circuit, and
yeah,
this basically, you mentioned about how in the film with your father, Civil War, how it's all in his mind, and he sort of replays the incident. And here we have basically a guy who's got a brain defect or something, and he keeps driving around in circles,
Yeah.
annoying people, and especially one person. And so this has not only the Twilight Zone, but I don't know if your father or you have gone to see a lot of stage plays, but this is very much. There was a movement called the absurdist movement in theater.
Mhm.
Samuel Beckett, Harold Pinter, where they took characters, they put them in these wacky or absurd situations, and tried to draw out the humanity from how people reacted normally. And so you have
Oh,
the main character is the guy in the car who seems flustered and being bullied by some guy whose car is broken down on the side of the road, and he
right.
tries to be helpful, and the other guy seems to be annoyed past the point of reasonability. So just like you had with the girl and the guy in the bicycle film,
Uh
you,
huh.
you you think that the guy who's trying to help is the poor put upon soul, until we
Yeah.
find out at the end that he's probably done this 2 or 3 or 4 times and bugged the hell out of this other guy. So talk to me about this thing. Did you want to just do a film about something that keeps repeating, or was the car the initial thing? So was the initial drive to do it that you wanted to do some repetition, or was the car the thing that led to the repetition?
Yeah, I did want to do something with repetition before I came up with the car because before writing it, before making it take place on a dirt road, I had it. My initial idea was a guy coming into a coffee shop, and he kept repeating the same thing.
Yeah.
And the first time that we see it happen, everyone's being mean to him, so we're confused with the main character. We're like, why is everyone bullying him? And then I would show him doing the same action again, and then I don't know how I would reveal that he has short-term memory loss, so that the audience would go, "Oh yeah." But yeah, I don't know. I don't know how it transitioned into the car. I guess not like I just love old cars. I love the way they look and sound in films.
Hmm.
So I guess my mind always goes to a car. Like if I can put a car in my story, then I'll do it because I love it. So I guess that was just like my the reason why I made it a car.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, the main thing that drove me to write this story was something happening over and over again, and the short film would just be like showing the 10th time that it happened, and
Hmm.
then we know that it's going to continue happening after the credits roll, right?
Yeah.
Um, but yeah,
And the last film of yours I want to talk about runs, let me see, about 5.5 minutes. It's called Up a Blind Estate, and this is
yes,
this is another film where we have a presupposition that well, actually, the main character has a presupposition. He goes to a wrong address, and he thinks that the person at that wrong address is doing something illegal. They get into a big brawl, and the fellow at the end leaves still having his own delusion. He
yeah,
hasn't been enlightened by reality.
by
Uh,
reality, right? Yeah,
yeah.
he's
So
still like
so again,
oblivious.
this is another one that uh, could be just a cheap gag, but it has humor, and it has a little bit of existential heft there, because we
Uh,
we don't know what exactly is wrong with this guy. Yeah, he loses his eyeglasses, but he's blind not only visually, he's blind intellectually. Talk a little
right.
bit about where you got the idea about that film, for that film rather.
Yeah. One thing that I believe in is that ignorance results in conflict. So I use that as sort of a starting point for my short films because if the main character is ignorant, he's not 100% sure of the situation, he'll just attack, right? And that's what Up the Blind State is about. Like, he has the wrong idea about this guy that's in the building, so he automatically assumes that he's a theft.
Yeah.
So he goes and attacks him and beats the shit out of him, right? And so this guy gets hurt because the main character didn't have all the facts, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, basically. Also, I wanted to do a fight scene because I haven't done a fight scene before. So
Mm. Well, let me end this interview. I usually give a couple of minutes for people to just give any closing statements, but I wanted to ask you one final question, because one of the things that I do notice, at least in your short films, and I haven't seen your feature film yet, but um, people tend to ghettoize themselves, and by that I mean people as an artist tend to. I'm a black artist. I'm a gay artist. I'm a this
Right.
artist. I'm a Jewish artist. I'm a female artist. The thing
Yeah.
about your film that I've seen, the short ones, is they're about people first, and it's not about, oh, I'm a female filmmaker. And I'm not saying that
Right.
you could not be a feminist filmmaker, or you could not express your political point of view, but I
Huh.
think it's important that you put the art first. And even though you're still young, your
Mm,
films, the art and the way that you're telling whatever the story is the primary thing. And that's
mm,
another one of the reasons that I wanted to do an interview with you, because I want to encourage that, because I get lots of young people,
mm,
writers who send me stuff, and I
mm.
always tell them these sorts of things. So let me just ask you though, do you feel a sense that you're the artist first and that you're a woman second? I mean, when you get behind the camera, you don't feel a need that I have to write about a female character. If you had
No.
an idea, for example, about a character from Mongolia who was,
Yeah.
a priest or whatnot, uh, that seems that would take precedence. Is that something that you strive for? That you want to be have that sort of universality?
Yes, definitely, 100%. I think gender and nationality is completely irrelevant when it comes to creating art because like that doesn't define a person because you're just born with that. That's just you can't decide that, right? But the things that you create, the art that you make, is what defines you. So yeah, I totally agree with you that I'm not this like feminist artist. I'm not like, oh, women need to be filmmakers, whatever. Um, I never advocate that. I never advertise it. Yeah, it's just it's all about the art. I don't care if the main character. I don't want to make the main character a female just to prove that oh girls can do it. I make the main character whatever the character is. You
Mm.
know, whatever however I see the character, I make them that person. Like I don't. Yeah, I don't really agree with like all these like feminist type stuff where there's film festivals for just female filmmakers or there's film festivals for black filmmakers or festivals for gays or whatever. Like I think that's irrelevant. That has nothing to do with film, you know?
Mm.
It is about the story and creating the art.
Okay.
So yeah, I'm not a feminist at all.
Well, let me just give you a couple of minutes just to talk about what you hope to do with your career going forward. Where do you see yourself in, say, 5 or 10 years, or where do you hope to be, as a filmmaker, both as an artist and also maybe in terms of getting your work to a larger audience?
Yeah, I definitely want to get my work to a bigger audience, and it'd be awesome to have a feature film distributed worldwide. So yeah, I guess down the road, I want to be making feature films, not just as an independent filmmaker, but hopefully with studios or film investors. Like bigger picture stuff.
Hmm.
But yeah, more short term though. I'm gonna be working this summer. I'm gonna be working on 3 new short films.
Okay.
So yeah.
Well, Wondering Pictures is the name of Marina Bruno's company. Also the name of her YouTube channel, and I'll have a link below this video also. So I want to thank you for spending some time talking with me, and I wish you good luck in the future.
Yes, thank you so much for having me.